Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Newspapers are fast going out of business or into irrelevance. Though not until the last editor is strangled with the last copy of the last edition will we truly be free. Some become websites, some keep talking without anybody listening, just for the prestige and the invitations to the palace. All are losing money, if the truth be told.
There are many reasons for this, and not all to do with the internet. It's true that cutting down trees on which to print news that has been updated by RT many times in the hours since you went to print is very last century. But the problem lies in the lies they call news in the first place.
Everybody always knew that newspapers held a torch for the views of their proprietors, and that was tolerable as long as those views were vaguely tolerable. In recent years, however, as proprietors, almost all foreign, and tax avoiders to boot, grew uglier and their views more repugnant, and as their hirelings became ever more transparently slavish, less people bought them, and fewer of those who did believed a word that was written in them.
Just the time then to open a new newspaper. But that's what happened following a meeting in a pub in Rochdale earlier this year.
Alan Davis had been a professional photographer and had never worked in print media before, but he felt the need to preach the word. The new arrival by that very name has burst on the scene with a vengeance, and Alan Davis joins us now. Alan, welcome to the Sputnik. This is probably the time I should tell you that I've lost more money publishing newspapers than anybody in Britain today. I've been the proprietor.
Except Murdoch.
Well, no, he actually makes money, but newspapers are a pretty quick way of losing your shirt. What makes you think this word is going to be any different?
Well, firstly, we're a cooperative. It's not owned by any one person. We've set it up in such a way that it never be owned by any one person. Everyone has an equal share in it, and we're a very loose cooperative that's been brought together by Facebook from people all over the country who have similar views about what's going on in the press. It won't make any money, but it won't lose money because all we've got is the printing costs that we offset against the sales. Everyone who works on it, including myself, voluntary.
Well, all of that sounds great in theory. My guess is you'll end up paying some of the printing costs yourself, unless you've got the secret to breaking out across the country. And you seem to have done a good job. I looked at your distribution list, seems to be quite far-flung, whereas I had thought it was concentrated in the northwest. How have you managed to obtain that level of coverage?
Well, we started off by crowdfunding. We started off, first of all, there's a meeting in a pub in Rochdale. We met in the Bourne pub, which is next to the old Pioneers Museum, where the cooperative movement started. Yeah. So we thought that was symbolic, and there'd be a blue plaque there, hopefully, next to that. 4 of us turned up at the first meeting. Wasn't that popular within certain echelons of the Labour Party. We called out on Facebook, started a group called Together Against the Tories, and just reached out over Facebook, and people came into it. And so we built up several hundred in that group, put the ideas of what we were going to do. We voted on everything that was possible to vote on, including the name of the newspaper. It wasn't my idea, but I kind of like it now. We kept as democratic as possible, and we got it out there. We knew, because I'd had a news agent years ago. I'd worked in news agents, so I knew the distribution was a cartel between Smiths and Menzies in this country. And the only way to break that is just to keep a really big hold on the distribution people, because I don't think it's that they're politically kind of sinister. I think they're just inept, because they're a cartel, they don't answer to anyone. So what we did is eventually we got the distribution manager for this group into a Facebook group, and we said, right, you answer questions. His name's John Musselwhite. Said, you answer questions. We can't do it while there isn't a paper in a shop in Plymouth, there isn't one in Sunderland. You tell them yourself. And it seems to be working now because we keep a very tight rein on it. So it is available across the country, but even then, some of the big shops don't take it. For instance, WH Smith's like to charge you several £1,000s just for the pleasure of putting it on their shelves, which is kind of balmy when you think about it. But the only why I did this was that I thought.
So where do you print the actual paper?
It's printed by the Mirror Group in Watford.
And they have nothing to do with the distribution?
They've not really helped with the distribution. Distribution in this country is always by Smiths Menzies. Even if you go through a middle person, it's always going to be by Smiths Menzies, and you haven't got a choice.
Okay.
How do you deal with the point that was implicitly made by us in the introduction that newspapers per se, whatever their political stripe, are last century, that when you can go onto a website that is being updated constantly throughout the day, why would you buy especially a weekly newspaper which is going to be really completely out of date?
Well, several answers to that. Firstly, you can turn off Facebook or you can turn off anything over the internet, and we've seen that. You know, as a regular on Facebook can see how they can switch posts off, not allow posts to come through. If it's physical and in your hands, it becomes a sort of meeting point. You know, people can actually, you can't edit what's already there once it's there. And it's also, there's lots of other Facebook news groups, but this kind of hopefully will bring it together as some kind of focal point for it all.
The politics of it are clear enough, and there's clearly a market. You might call it a niche. I hope it's not too small a niche. That Jeremy Corbyn has several 100,000 supporters at the very least in the Labour Party in Britain. That ought to translate into a niche market for you. Is it?
It's slow work because even when we started the first crowdfunder to that, and by the way, we're crowdfunding again now, Crowdfunder UK, if you want to have a look at it. We're trying to up the number of days that we can go out. But if you look at Jeremy Corbyn's Facebook page likes, I think there's something like 600,000. Jeremy Corbyn's actually got the people there. And you look at some of the papers, even ostensibly the Corbyn-supported Mirror had a headline not so long ago, Corbyn must go. Now, if that's the left-wing press, now, the Morning Star, great, you know, we're in great terms with the Morning Star, but it's not a tabloid. And what we're trying to do is something that's perhaps for people who haven't got into politics, and hopefully as we go down the line they might pick it up and think, oh, that's an interesting read, that's a bit different. And that's why we have cartoons.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite comprehensive in that sense. You've got cartoons, you've got sports, you've got culture, arts.
Exactly, gotcha. And we're trying to make it so eventually, might sound silly, but there's a lot of people who might support UKIP because they've just read the constant drip, drip, drip of the media and television telling them it's all about this, it's all about that. Well, perhaps if they read sort of more balanced, they might think, oh, hold on, I saw that on the BBC and that ain't true because they've got the figures in here. So that's the idea of it.
And has, I mean, it's not the word of the Lord, but it is the word of Corbyn, I see, with a quick leaf through. Has he given you any encouragement, any support?
Well, I've met and talked to him a couple of times, but I think he's got a lot of other things on his plate. It'd be great if he could get on board and sort of give us a mention. We talked to him about it and he's approved of it, but it'd be nice if he could put it on his Facebook page or mention it around any posts.
Well, it doesn't seem too much to ask. You've got him on every page of yours. I mean, let me go back to this question of niche. You can't compete with news. You can't compete even with the Morning Star for news. Can you?
Well, I think we possibly can because we start off slowly, and obviously I've got no clue about newspapers, and we're building that as we're going along by learning, by trial and error. But one thing we can do, and we're starting to do now, is build up groups of people who are into certain subjects. For instance, there's one of our guys up in Leeds, Ian, who's building up a Facebook group for people who are left-wing and are into football. So if we can get 100, 200 people who each support a different team and they each write about their team, then we could have it funnier and more accurate than any sports page and any mainstream
So
media.
how large is your pool of volunteers that contribute?
We've got on the database of people who've written for us so far, there's well over 100. Volunteers have done things like proofreading, help promote the paper on their Facebook pages. There's several thousand.
That's good.
Well, that's very encouraging. But let me go back to my niche point. You need to, it seems to me, provide something that normal news doesn't provide. That has to be analysis, it has to be inside information, it has to be a look back historically, which,
Absolutely.
in my opinion, there's far too little of.
We have done some of that. We've had Ian Hodgson writes for us. He's written a couple of columns. Manuel Cortez has written alongside one of our other authors a piece. We've got, I think, about 20 or 30 lecturers or teachers or headmasters that are going in there, several scientists. So we do like to get a balanced idea, and I think it's these sort of people who feel so strongly and so angry that they want an outlet for their views, and they look in the mainstream media and they don't see one.
Well, what do you think when you look at the mainstream media? I mean, when you look at a newsstand, I mean, personally, I just turn away now. I buy no newspapers. I wouldn't. I'd buy yours and I'd buy the Morning Star, but the mainstream newspapers, forget it. How bad is it out there in the mainstream
We've
press?
stopped being angry. We just laugh now. We think there must be a great niche, and we're thinking of doing a page spread each edition on how bad are the mainstream media and some of the lies, and just put in the truth of what they said. Like I say, we're crowdfunding again on Crowdfunder as the anti-Sun, because that's what we hope to be. We hopefully be everything that the Sun aren't. You know, they tell the truth, be real. Look at things from a balanced point of view. I mean, for some subjects, for instance, the EU referendum, we kind of split 50-50 on that, but we argued it. We thought we put a fairly balanced argument either side and told the truth, not the absolutely ridiculous things that were being said in the mainstream media.
Well, the wall of racism and xenophobia that one sees outside any newsagent, the merest glance at it would, you're right, make you laugh. Yeah. But they're not laughing. And they're not laughing all the way to the bank, because most of those newspapers will remain unsold. Newspapers are fast going out of business. We've got to hope that the Word is the exception to the rule. The very best of luck with it. And thanks for giving me a platform in it too. Thanks very much, Alan Davis.
Coming up, what is next for the purged, the expelled, the damned in today's scarcely functional Labour Party? Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Sputnik. Let me declare an interest. I was expelled by the Labour Party over the Iraq War 13 years ago. I said then that they would rue the day, and so they did, twice. Expulsions have always been a method of control in Labour politics. One of those giving evidence in my support when I was being expelled was Michael Foot, who went on to be the party's leader. Many of the now great and good in Labour history, like Nye Bevan, were expelled at one time or another.
Mass expulsions, however, are something new, but it has become a fine art after the victory of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader and the great inner-party struggle this has sparked. Literally thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, were suspended, mainly and in some cases expelled by the anti-Corbyn Labour National Executive Committee. Now, many are being welcomed back by the same people who suspended them, now that the voting is over and Corbyn has been re-elected.
One of those suspended and now welcomed back is more sincerely welcomed here today. He's Charlie Allen, a columnist on the Morning Star, as I once was myself. Charlie, welcome to the show and welcome back to the Labour Party, if I can say so, as a non-member. What was it all about? What were the pretexts, at least?
Well, I think you have to look at the purge as a kind of weapon of mass suspension.
I wish I'd said that.
They basically, the Labour machine, the anti-Corbyn Labour machine, suspended thousands of members. We don't know how many yet. They refuse to say. At least 3,000, but quite possibly more. Basically, without any investigation, to deprive us of our vote in the leadership election. And now, on the flimsiest of reasons, and it's true there were some abusive comments by some people on social media, most of them not Labour members, but thousands of us were suspended for the most flimsiest of reasons, like I used the phrase Blairite hooligan, and that was flagged up and used as one of the reasons for me
The
to
least you could say, really.
the Blairite hooligan I thought was pretty mild. It was the time of the Euro Cup, and I was they were smashing up the party. But no, that didn't get past the party's witch hunters, who, as I say, now that the election's over, thousands of us, again, without any investigation, have been welcomed back into the party with a formal warning that's going to remain on our file, and our vote has gone. And not only was our vote gone, we couldn't go to the Labour Party National Conference, which was just after the leadership was out. We've been locked out of our local Labour Party, democracy, because we haven't been able to go to AGMs and stuff like that. So I lost my place on my local executive committee. There's been, huge ramifications to this, but the party just wants to sweep it under the carpet now. Welcome us back, give us a warning, let's all move on. But I can tell you there are thousands of us, and I've met a lot of them on social media, and we're not prepared to move on. We want to have some kind of justice for the purged.
Quite so. The reason why we speculated perhaps hundreds of thousands is, of course, because there wasn't just one purge, there was two. So there were people who were purged by the artificial shifting of a deadline which hadn't existed previously. Then there were people whose votes simply got lost in the post, in the electronic post. Then there were those who were purposefully suspended, like you. Some, like some friends of mine, who were purposefully expelled for equally flimsy reasons. And the Labour Party will not say how many are involved in all of these categories. It must have been done with a view to influencing the outcome. And yet the outcome, for anyone with eyes to see, was scarcely ever in doubt. Surely.
Right. Yeah, it was like a failed attempt. Like the coup itself against Jeremy Corbyn ended in failure. But that didn't stop them trying. And it's interesting, if you look at the keywords that they used, because we now know that they basically trawled through our social media.
So when you say they trawled, they were physically, they didn't have
party
machines.
machine. Well, they would go onto Twitter, as far as I understand it, type in these keywords, which included words like traitor, a word in the red flag, so we can't essentially even quote our own song. Words like rat, hooligan, Blairite hooligan. They went through our Twitter, which is not. It's not clear that they have the legal right to do that anyway. There's data protection laws, and in fact, there are
nor
court
is it clear
cases.
that the person involved necessarily sent the tweet.
No.
In some cases, they were retweets.
In some cases, there was mistaken identity.
My wife tweets in my name. I tweet in her name. How do they know who tweeted? There was no investigation of these things.
That's the most shocking thing. There was no investigation before we were suspended, and there was no investigation to unsuspend us. So it's so obvious. If there was,
transparent.
It's so transparent.
But of course, they went to the High Court on appeal, and won the appeal. And the basis of their appeal is that the court held that the National Executive Committee can change anything that it likes, can write or rewrite any rule that it likes.
That seemed, I mean, the court ruling was quite complicated and quite messy, and I don't know, there are several reasons for that, but that seems to be an impression that they can just make it up as they go along. And in terms of, they wouldn't let anyone who joined after January, there's a kind of a 6-month retrospective freeze date, which is a kind of an unheard of thing. Retrospective. It reminds me a bit of these retrospective banned words like traitor. They weren't, no one was told they were banned. And they weren't actually banned until months after we used them. So it's this whole retrospective justice. It's a violation of natural justice. I will say there's another category of people who were purged, and that was the registered supporters, the 25-pounders. These are people who paid £25. They had a 2-day window to do it. To sign up, which would give them a vote, and thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, the party took the money and then said, sorry, no vote for you.
And then they took the money to go to High Court.
Yeah, they used
They used the members' money.
against the members.
Yeah.
Really?
That was just it.
Orwell couldn't have made
Right.
this story
Right.
up.
It brings the party into disrepute. Let's be honest. Who is going to join the Labour Party now? Or what are they going to be thinking? When they think, well, I'm going to join, but is my social media going to be trawled through it? Do I have to watch what I say? Can I not use the word trade? I mean, we can all agree that hate speech has got no place in the Labour Party.
Sure.
But then who decides the line between hate speech and free speech? Where do you draw the line? It's the bureaucrats, the party machine, and the way that they define it, the way they draw the line, it does look a lot like they're targeting the Corbynistas.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd have to paraphrase a judge one time, you'd have to be a blind moron in a hurry not to see what they're up to.
Right.
Jeremy Corbyn himself is effectively powerless to deal with this because of the situation on the National Executive Committee, where, depending on what the issue is, he doesn't have a majority.
It's very difficult for him, especially because the party is now on a kind of election footing. The last thing he wants is to trigger a huge, to exacerbate the internal civil war. He just wants to make peace, move on, get the party machine working properly as it should do. You have to remember that since he was elected, the party machine hasn't really been working for the leadership very well. You remember on the day of his first inauguration, they all came to it wearing black because they thought of it as a funeral. And since then, I've heard it described as a kind of work to rule, that the leadership office will say, okay, we need this press release done, or we need this opinion poll taken, or we need to get some data. And the machine will go, okay, sure, we'll get on that. And then nothing will happen. And then they'll ring up, what's going on? Oh, no, we're just waiting for... There are all these obstacles that are kind of thrown in the leadership's...
Well, that's why Gayatri's opening words about scarcely functional. It is actually now scarcely functional, the Labour Party. They are... For example, the leader took an exceptionally fine view on the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia, the use of those arms in slaughtering civilians in Yemen, and there was mass abstention, deliberately, conspiratorially contrived with their own whips to scupper it. And the government would have lost the vote if the Labour members hadn't abstained. You say Labour's on election footing. It's scarcely believable as an electoral force in these circumstances.
It's shocking. I mean, if that doesn't bring the party into disrepute, I don't know what does. You had unnamed Labour MPs being quoted in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, basically saying to die. I mean, they're saying that. I mean,
yes.
I mean, in whatever world, jokes like that aren't acceptable. But if it was a joke, they say it was a joke. But since the tragic murder of assassination of Joe Cox, we just can't. And these are Labour MPs talking to national journalists. I just don't. I don't understand. I don't understand why the Labour Party NEC General Secretary don't go after those people. They're the ones bringing the party into disrepute.
You say you don't understand, but I know that you do.
Yeah, well, maybe.
We all understand why not. In a word, Charlie, because we're out of time, is coup number 3 going to happen?
I think that it's all up in everything's to play for at the moment. I think that the anti-Corbyn, or the Corbyn skeptics, let's call them that, within the Labour Party are split. And most of the majority, the kind of centre-left, they just want to win elections. They just want to get the party back together. They want, to repair the machine. Remember, the Labour Party machine is the greatest campaigning machine that's ever been built, probably. And unfortunately, at the moment, there are bits that aren't working properly, so they need to be repaired. And for me, personally, maybe because on my purge letter, it was the General Secretary Ian McNichol's signature at the bottom, and everyone else, all the other people who were purged. He's the one responsible for personally purging us, using powers given to him. He didn't have to suspend us without an investigation. That was his choice. And I think his position really is untenable now. And for us to move on as a party, I don't think there should be a purge of the right or anything. I don't believe in purges. But for us to move on, I think the General Secretary should realise that he's lost the confidence of his members, do the decent thing, and then I think together as a party we can move on.
Charlie Allen, thanks for joining us. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's right then, Gayatri?
So we told the audience that we would have a purged member of the Labour Party on the show, and in response we received so many of people who experienced the same. Ken02, for example, £25 member, summarily told that I had tweeted something bad and barred from voting. Silence ever since. £25 poorer. And I Labina says, many of us now unsuspended after a huge outcry, but with a bogus warning on our file.
Illegal, unspeakable, and intolerable. Should not be tolerated.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that they don't leave it lying like that. Well, that's all the tweets that we have for today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on social media, on Twitter at RT_Sputnik, on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.